And it didn't ask me if I wanted to record one place or another, so we'll assume it has standard settings.
Yeah, I've never done anything except just click the button. I've never had to do anything else. So.
So is it
Sometimes
just the, so it's just the 5 of us?
I have only heard from John that he was not going to be joining us, so I don't know about Lily.
And
Well,
Frank
I
and
think we
Wendell.
should get, I
And-
think we
and
need to
for
get
Frank.
going. First item on the agenda is to approve the minutes from our last meeting, which was September 9th, I think it was. I don't have it right in front of me, something like that. Yeah, September 9th.
Yes.
Do I have a motion? Second?
I wrote them, so you guys should probably
Oh,
approve.
yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Matt, second? You muted.
I've only been using Zoom for about 1.5 years now.
I know, yeah.
I was gonna say, I'm not actually a voting member, so I don't know that I can
Oh,
second.
right.
I can say they were right, but you know, that's just
Oh,
me.
Here comes Kendra Joe.
Good.
Well, I say we just approve them. What the heck?
Okay. All right, Pete, Scott, I'm going to put you as the second person then.
Okay,
Pete approves. You
and I'll
endorse.
second.
Seconded.
All
All-
in favor? We all were in favor, I think. Okay, second item is the update on the invitation to join Vetro Cohort 3.
Yes, so I got an email from folks at Vetro saying that they had an opportunity. They have some funding through the state, through the Connect Maine Authority, to continue what they're doing with these cohorts. So they invited us to participate in Cohort 3, which would give us another year of free service with them using the platform as we need to. And I think it's a great resource. You know, when we spoke with Brian Lippold of Casco Bay, he said his recommendation was if we were to move forward, that we use Vetro as our platform to keep track of if we're going to build anything out, it's, you know, figure out the as-built and everything else. So it's a great resource. It could cost us a lot of money if we were to do it independently. So this is a nice 1-year extension for us. And so they provided some documentation and Derlin has signed off on that.
Awesome. Any other comments on the Vetro Cohort?
I wish we would use it more extensively, you know, but we're not at a stage where we can do that, but.
No, I think it's coming. So,
Exactly. So I think if anything, you combining this data, and this is something that might come up in the next topic, but combining the data on the map to see where things are, that's what would be very helpful. So.
great. My dog just went barking, running off, so I'm just seeing where she went, but probably after a bear. Okay, number 3, combining Vetro and Google Doc formats. And Pete, you did a lot of work on doing some correlation, right?
Yeah, I can show you guys what I've been doing. So I'm not sure exactly where this data is going to end up. So we could recombine it another way, but basically I took the Vetro stuff and I put it on top of the Google and paper responses, because those were a little bit more easier to understand, and there was a bunch of extra information that Vetro has. A lot of that I think was just about their platform specifically. So if it turns out that we're trying to get more data into Vetro, I can just take another pass and go the other direction. It's only 250 total responses, so it really wasn't too onerous to work with that. So essentially on the spreadsheet, Kathy gave me one that had 2 tabs, the Vetro tab. So this is the raw Vetro information. And then the Google and paper. So this was combined. the paper ones with the Google ones. I did wish that we had kept track of which ones were paper, just so that in the future we knew our rough percentage of how many people filled it out.
Well,
Kathy, do you know how to do that? If we could,
Pete, I can tell you that all the things that came in by paper, we picked up at our office and we input them into the Google sheet.
oh, I see, okay.
So it's the difference between paper or that. I mean, some people, after we pick those, anytime something came in on paper, we put it into the Google format.
Is there some way that I could tell by how you put it in that it was something that you guys put in manually?
I will look into that.
Just because then we could say, okay, this was paper, so we could say, okay, 25% of the responses were from mail. Then if we want to do another survey, we would have the knowledge to say, okay, like, you know, we kind of know what our expectations are. And it might just be good information in the future.
We still have the forms. We can just simply count them.
Okay, yeah, if you want to just give me a list of the addresses or something, I can pop those in and just say that the source was paper. So because what I did when I combined them, I added another column at the end called source, just so we know where it came from. It's just good to know.
Okay,
And so I didn't know which one was Google, which one was paper. So
gotcha.
if we can
Alright.
clean that up, then we would have a little bit more knowledge for our next survey if we ever have one.
Okay.
So
We can look into that because we still have the forms, so we can update that and clarify either Google or paper.
yeah, or if you want to just give me a list of the paper ones, and I can update it here. But yeah, not a big deal. And then I also went in and the combined, and I tried to clean up some things. There were some kind of funky bits here and there. I tried to be minimal in my cleanups. I have some questions if when we're on with Wendell. Don't really know what good retransmission data would look like, so I didn't clean that up, but people would type in things in different ways, and so I just tried to make everything as clean as I could without destroying the raw information, though I didn't adjust anything on this Vetro tab and Google and Paper. Those are basically unchanged. All right, so that's all the boring stuff. I started working on I don't know why it's taking so long. I started working on a dashboard. This may or may not be useful with a couple charts. So this is a pie chart for connection type. Gives us an overall, this is roughly what Kathy showed last time that Google gives you kind of for free. It's really easy to make these things with Excel. So we see it's, obviously we knew this already, that the Pac-Man is Spectrum, gobbling up everybody else. Then we have location type. Again, this is something that we already knew, but we were adding in the Vetro stuff. So it continues basically similar pattern, which is it's half residential, almost another half of second home. So that's useful information. And then I had a couple other quick things.
In that thing there, the grid doesn't include second homes. The legend doesn't include what the other big blue thing.
Oh, here, it's probably just because
Size of it, yeah.
size. Yeah, let me see if I
But
can.
what's interesting and what's nice that this happened is a lot of the early responses were from summer residents, I think. And after a period of time, more primary home owner occupied came in. So that's a greater number now, which is good.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I just slid that over and it was there.
Good.
And then we have the raw information here. Now, a couple other kind of quick things, and I'm saving the fun stuff for last. I just averaged the average and standard deviation of the connection speeds. So standard deviation is kind of how much do things change from the average. So there's a very big deviation with download speeds. That's because some people have very, very fast internet, some people have very, very slow internet. You see that number is a lot lower with the latency, so that that doesn't move as much. We can figure out ways of visualizing that information if you guys are interested. And then I did another one, which is just a chart of what people would like to pay for their maximum payment. Again, it's just, the name of the game, I think, with analysis and visualizations is we try to find combinations of data points that can give us some kind of insight, or ways of visualizing that can give us some insight. So this is all right. I mean, it's pretty even. I think most people clearly prefer $75. It's not a bad number. So I started there. Now, what kind of my discovery was that we can ask questions of Excel and they automatically generate things, which is really, really cool. So one thing I did was I really wanted to combine two things and see. So one was provider satisfaction, what I call it, which is combining two questions. Are you happy? And who's your provider? So immediately we got an insight, which is nobody likes DSL. And so you can see how that one's inverted, right? Well, actually, some people like DSL. Literally nobody said yes, that they liked their cellular mobile hotspot. That is exclusively a no answer. Fiber optic was even. Satellite, nobody said they liked it. Spectrum actually is pretty good with customer satisfaction. You see it's about, 2/3 of people are happy with their Spectrum.
How can somebody not like their fiber optic?
I don't know. Well, we can look at that in a second, and that's easy to find. So I thought that just the combination of those two questions, are you happy? What's your provider? Was kind of interesting. I also asked the same thing with Village. Problem is we didn't have Village for Vetro.
I know. We can put that information in though, if we can identify, some streets we know right off the bat, blah, blah, blah. So I think.
So I don't have that knowledge of the town geography, but yeah, if we can help out and fill in pieces, that would be great. So this is a Village satisfaction. By your Village, are you happy? Seems like Somesville is just a bunch of unhappy people. So again, I don't know, maybe this is useful. Maybe this isn't. It takes, as you can see, I'll show you in a second, it takes about 20 seconds to create one of these things.
Yes is green though, right?
Oh, yes. I was playing with this. You're right. So Somesville is happy. Excuse me.
Yeah.
We live in a beautiful village. Why wouldn't we be happy?
Oh, yeah. So there you go. So most people are happy. Pretty Marsh. There are more no's and yeses, and that shouldn't really be a surprise. And Beach Hill, which is so all kind of west side of the town, right? I'll show you a couple more, and then I'm going to make one in real time. You guys can kind of see, and then you'll see how we can do this collaboratively. I also did Village download speeds. It's taking a second to render because here we go. So this one's complicated. This is 3 data points at once. This is your Village, your download speed, and your provider. It's a bit confusing, but we could do things like this where you could kind of see, okay, Spectrum is orange. So you can kind of see how Spectrum deviates from Village across the villages. For instance, Hall Quarry has a lower average speed for Spectrum than Seal Harbor. I think there's somebody at Seal Harbor has some really fast internet and was throwing things off. Or we can see that Satellite, Northeast Harbor had a pretty high speed for Satellite, though I can't really imagine that that's the correct answer. So this is a little bit complicated when you're looking at 3 things at once, which is Village, speed, and provider. Then I did a couple things. I noticed there's actually a very few number of people who said that they did not have internet. So I thought it would be useful to surface their comments because there's really only a handful of people who said they don't even have internet. So I just kind of built a tab that just explained or just presented what they said. And so we can kind of analyze their comments, their different reasons. And I made another one, which is specifically people who have Spectrum and are not happy. So again, so this is now you can see the 2 filters at the top here. What's your type of internet? Cable, Spectrum, Time Warner. Are you happy? No. And we're able to look at this. And I can very easily go in here and say, well, what about maybe DSL? How are people answering their DSL questions? So it takes a little bit of know-how, but we can work through this stuff together. Now, I'll show you one new thing, and then we can talk about it. I had an idea of you can literally ask questions in almost regular English, and Excel will try to figure out what you want. So I asked, are you happy by the average download speed? And they gave me this chart, which says the average speed of people who say they're happy is 95. The average download speed of people who say that they're not happy is 55. There's a huge gap there. And it actually correlates with if they like their internet or not. So that says to me that if you have a speed of close to 100, you're more likely to say that you're happy with your internet.
Mhm.
Versus people who have, I hope this is big enough for you guys to see. If you say no, it's likely that you have half the internet speed as the people who said that they were satisfied.
Mhm.
So I just want to pause there. Is this making sense? Are there other things you guys want to see? We can just start playing with this and try to answer some questions.
I think this is fascinating, and I'm glad you started to poke through and do greater analysis. Yesterday, we had an Economic Development Committee meeting, and broadband is always on the topic for that agenda. And they wanted to know more about this. And I was only able to look at the real analysis for the Google version, not the Vetro version, because quick analysis. And there it's like 55% of the people were happy. And so as a committee, how do we take that information? How does that direct what it is we should do as our next steps, if anything? And they probed a little further and said, okay, well, let's dig into the data. Who's happy, who's unhappy? Are the people with this service happy or unhappy?
Exactly.
So I think you've done exactly what they were hoping to do. We also had an offer if we wanted to do anything more. One of the people on that committee, Megan Bailey, lives here in Northeast Harbor and works at the Margaret Chase Smith Center and does this kind of analysis a lot, and so has offered to help us with some more analysis if we would like it. If it's all right with the committee, I might send this document to her and let her poke around in it without changing what you've already done, but see if she comes up with a different lens, a different way of looking at things. So
I think too it's a lot of great information, and to think about if we want to move this forward, what is the most critical information to be able to share with people, and how can we share it in the clearest, plainest, simplest way?
It's an interesting question, because every time you do an analysis, you're telling a story. As Kathy said, it's one lens. There are so many ways we can look at this.
Right.
So I think as a committee, we need to try to find a way, a balance between an unbiased lens, but a lens that is useful to get a little bit of insight. So, and Kathy said it, when you just look at 55% say, are you happy? You look at one question, it's really, you gain some knowledge, but I think you gain significantly more when you start to cross-reference it a little bit more. But the problem is, we need to do it in a way that's not presupposing any sort of outcome.
Right.
Because it's really easy to build a whole story, build a narrative for what you want based upon the charts that you choose to show.
Right.
So we want to tell a clear, unbiased story, but something that is, you can't just give the raw data, expect people to come to their own conclusions, because it's not very useful. So we have to try to find some good things that show clear knowledge that we've gained without really trying to steer it one way or the other.
I think that there were a ton of responses from Spectrum users that were negative, people who were unhappy, all of those comments. And if we could narrow it down to, if there was categories, it was slow, intermittent, poor service, cost. There were a lot of different options in there, and maybe we can do a little bit more work on that, because later on in our agenda today is an update on our next public meeting is with Spectrum. And so looking further at the response to Spectrum users and maybe geographically who doesn't have Spectrum, what are their plans going forward? So maybe there's a way that we can use this information to help in that conversation with Spectrum. And I think that Kendra Jo, you're going to be helping us with that meeting.
Yes, yes, I am.
Is this useful to you for that purpose?
Come on video real quick. Yeah, I think it is. I mean, I think it'll be helpful to use this data to kind of probe Spectrum and say, you know, this is the current response from the community in terms of your infrastructure. What are your intentions of improvement to the current infrastructure, especially if you were to build out further in the community? Because they're leaning towards new installs being fiber-based, at least in some places, not all places. But if that's the case, then they would be creating a divide within their own customer base. Those existing customers having unreliable access and not satisfied, new customers having at least fiber, maybe not all the way to the premise, but a stronger fiber backhaul and middle mile. So yeah, I think this helps to identify as an incumbent, how are you not just addressing the needs that remain in the community, but also the needs that currently exist amongst your own customers, without allowing an opportunity for people to just like get on and trash Spectrum and make, you know, their customer service issues Melinda's problem, because she's not in that field.
So yeah, Kathy, one thing that I started to explore a little bit and I didn't see a quick way was trying to look at frequency of words used and this might be something, it's a small enough data set that maybe we could do it manually, but tagging these people's responses with, okay, did they mention unreliability? Did they mention speed? Did they mention customer service or whatever? And then we could have a bit of an understanding of the major topics that people are talking about when they are dissatisfied. So that could be an area to expand. And I think that it would be great to have any help, especially somebody who does, I don't do data analysis for a living. It really like Microsoft Excel, but so we could have help and we can, you know, we could work collaboratively. Like maybe some people can help fill in the villages that are missing. Some people can do some tagging of these things if we think they're interesting. I think as a committee, we need to try to solve a couple problems with this data. One is if we're going after grant funding or anything, or what are the data points that we need to present for that, right, Kendra? There's probably some, or just raw data that we need. So there's like that kind of angle. And then how do we present it to the town? What's going to be a useful way of presenting this data to the town? And then maybe for some of these more specific things like Spectrum. So if we can collectively come up with what are the clear questions we're asking of the data, then I can tackle that a little bit, or this other person can tackle some of that. But as I started doing this, I was like, oh my God, I can ask so many questions. I need the committee to tell me what we're asking.
Well, I also think and not just the questions, but like, what's the story you're trying to have people take away from hearing you talk about this? If you're using the data as the, you know, foundation in which you move forward in your community, what do you want it to say to people to get them to go with a municipal build, to get them to go with, yes, there needs to be a community-wide solution. Yes, we should just work with our incumbent.
Yeah, an example I just thought in my head was, if I looked at some of the data, I'd say in a lot of cases, I'm seeing people are happy with their service kind of 2 to 1 in a lot of areas. Unless, that's just a general. So then the question is, okay, so what, if I were a citizen, or is it that we're just trying to make everyone happy? That we want everyone to say, yes, they're happy with it? Because right now, even the ones that say they're happy with the does that mean that people are happy with the download speed, that we don't want to expand fiber optic into their areas? Because even though they're happy today, That's not necessarily for the future, right?
Yeah, maybe
So
we
it's-
should have had a question, which is, would you support a municipal build out? I don't think we asked that question.
No.
We did not, but we could do another survey down the road, you know? I think we would have to present some options to people and some real explanation of what does that mean? Who's gonna do that? What's that gonna cost? What was interesting was one of the people who had Spectrum, I believe, in their no unhappy answer, also has fiber on Sutton. On they have a second house. They have on Sutton Island. They have Axiom that manages the fiber like twice as fast, half the cost. You know, so I think that as we think about another round of survey questions, we have to present a lot more information. What does a municipal build mean? Who would manage it? What would be that? What would be the other? What are all the details so that people are better informed to make those decisions? Just a municipal build? Some people might say, nope, not going to happen. We don't want bigger government. You know, who's going to manage that? How's that going to fix my taxes? So,
I mean, if you looked at the Pretty Marsh, that was a kind of a split 5 to 6, I think it was, for satisfied or not.
And this doesn't include Vetro, by the way.
Right. But my point being that this is where you got to be careful with data, because if I was a grumpy old taxpayer saying, well, you guys spent all this money to expand out in the pretty marsh, you know, spend all this money and look, you know, where are the results? So we just have to be really careful. And again, is it about future proofing, or is it about just getting everyone up to an acceptable speed?
So take that question and then Kendra Joe's question, what is the purpose of the committee? Is the committee here to make a recommendation, or is the committee, should we have a viewpoint into where we want broadband to go? Or is it to gather information and do some due diligence and present options? I'm a little unclear.
I think the committee this committee is going to need to make a recommendation, just because, again, we're talking about, you know, the possibility of a very large project, cost wise and just geographically. You know, I don't want to speak for the rest of the select board, but I think we'd be comfortable relying, especially where this group's been the one doing all of the legwork, relying on a recommendation rather than just saying, well, we've listened to the data, here's what we've decided to do as a board.
and I'm not sure that we're completely done looking at the information anyway. I mean, I think that we need to figure out, why does Seal Harbor have so much better download speed than another community? So we need to combine some of this info with, where's the infrastructure from the incumbents? What are their plans to improve that? How can anyone control costs if people are paying a lot of money for some of this stuff, you know? And there's no way that we can control cost if you go with an incumbent. So, and I think if one of another topic for today is, what is the county doing? And are we able to tap into something because money would be available, even if enough people are satisfied? Should we expand services to reach a broader group if it was affordable to do so? And that might be available through, you know, federal or state funding. So I don't think we're at a point where we can make our recommendation very soon.
Right. And I would say that I think the scope of any project is going to be completely dependent on those federal funds. You know, how
Yes.
far we go with it. And, you know, I mean, it's one of those things like the chicken and the egg. We sort of have to, do we need this proposal in place before we can find out how much we might be able to get? Or do we just have to wait until we find out how much we can get until we decide the scope of the project? So I don't know, I think it's good that we're sort of ahead of where we need to be at this point, to be honest.
Are there any near-term clear deliverables on some analysis that we can see, maybe for Connect Main or to prepare for the next meeting?
I know the one question I had that maybe for Spectrum is it seems to be there's also a clear message about an issue of seasonality.
That's what I wanted to, that was one of the other areas I wanted to look at was seasonal versus year round and satisfaction levels with that.
Are you
Because it
happy?
seemed to me, I saw
by-
quite a bit of things get bogged down in the summertime.
Mhm.
And I would be curious on what Spectrum, for example, Spectrum, what's their plan to help?
Are you happy by location? No.
So Scott, you're suggesting that we would ask Spectrum when we meet with them about that issue of big population influx in the summertime that has an impact, a negative impact on availability or speeds.
Yeah, well, and I don't mean to jump ahead in the agenda, but when we're looking at the analysis of the data, the two things are clear to me that would be appropriate to ask Spectrum. Obviously by far they're the biggest provider, right? So question number one is what is their plan for, what is their plan for extension, or extending their services or improving their services. And an offshoot of that is there seems to be, from the data that we collected, a bogging down during the summer season of data of download speed. And is that on their radar, and do they have any plans to address that?
It'd be interesting to do these speed tests again in like February and see how
Yeah.
the Spectrum numbers compare. But I think Scott makes a really good point. And, whether they'll give us a straight answer or not about plans to beef up infrastructure or anything, we'll see. But I think the question needs to be asked because it definitely has an impact.
All right, I can go through and look at two areas. One is paper versus Google. So who was putting information in there, one format or another, and the village data, and that might be helpful.
Yeah.
And I will connect with Vetro. We were hoping that we could, through them, just take the Google forms and upload it to Vetro, the same way that Pete combined them for this analysis, but we're looking at it in Excel. We want to see if we can get that contact information over there. I think there are 114 that we would rather not have to go through and put in into the Vetro platform, because also it does mapping and a speed test right there. And if we were putting that information in by hand, I'm not sure how it skews things. It could all be from this address. That might, so I have to check on that.
Is there a way to put the information directly into Vetro, like the back end? 'Cause then we
Well,
could,
that's what I would hope to do. Yes.
yeah. I
Yeah.
think it would be good. Like I said, it's not so huge of a data set that we can have it in completion in Vetro. We also have a completion in a spreadsheet, which will be good for us to prepare presentations and
Right.
do our other analysis and so on.
Well, Pete, I just want to thank you for your time and efforts. I find the data really intriguing.
Sure.
And I think we're not there yet, but I think it's building a great base for us. So I really appreciate all that you did with that.
So yeah, happy to help.
And that's what happens. I mean, with good surveys, I mean, it brings in data that forces you to ask more questions, right? That's kind of what is part of the process. So
Mhm.
Yeah, so as you guys you know, in the middle of the night, you're kept up at night because you can't think of anything but broadband. If you think of questions,
Or you
let me
got a
know.
crying child?
I'll work on this one, which is the type of residence combined with satisfaction, and maybe also combined with provider, to see if we can see any trends there.
That would be great.
I didn't really know what to do with the how many children or how many students work from home or not. I was kind of at a loss in terms of how to look at that, but maybe maybe you guys have some better ideas of how that could be useful.
I think, you know, we'd be looking at it, how many students are there who are impacted by it? When something like COVID is keeping everybody at home, everybody was on school on, you know, for a good portion of the year. So the impact of that, but I don't know that the numbers represented in this survey were complete enough.
I think the one thing though about this is it could almost be that you don't need a survey for that information. I think everybody's well aware that during the pandemic that, you know, the home became the workplace and the school place, you know?
Yeah, and we asked this in this magical window of there was no COVID for like 6 weeks.
Yeah.
No school either. Summertime.
Cool.
Okay, should we move on to the Spectrum event?
Sure. So we have just changed this. I read, we had originally lined up Spectrum to meet with us on October 19. And since I put out this agenda, I realized that there was another town meeting on that day at 5 o'clock. So I asked Melinda if she was still available for the following week, which is October 26th. So we have now set it up for that date. So Tuesday, October 26th at 5:30. And I can play host, and I think Kendra Joe is going to be our MC for that meeting. And I will we'll start doing some publicity around that and get it on the town calendar as well.
So is this an hour? Is that right?
Yes.
We try to keep it in an hour, yeah.
Hour.
Yeah.
So usually it's about 5 minutes of intros, and then overview of their current service and any plans for upgrades or expansion within the town of Mount Desert. That can be expanded to also say just within the entire island, if you'd like. And then the whole time people can be putting questions into the chat if they'd like. Usually with an incumbent provider, I hesitate to allow people to come off mic and ask questions because it usually turns into an attack or a soapbox moment. Which might not like Spectrum, but I do like Melinda and I feel for her and her job. And so allowing people to put questions in the chat, but if there are questions that the committee can come up with that I can ask of her, happy to do that. Or if someone else on the committee would like to ask those questions, you can. That's probably the other thing is, you know, we can say that the only people asking questions tonight are those from the select board or the broadband committee. So that it feels like there's that opportunity for you all to dig a little deeper and get what you need out of that conversation. So that's another path, or you can do those questions beforehand and I can be the one that's moderating the entire conversation and asking questions.
We have a lot of emails from this response. We could email all Spectrum users and say, let them know about it and say, we will be fielding some questions from the town. Please provide us your questions. And then we have that opportunity to filter out the really nasty ones. I mean, does that make sense? It's kind of best of both worlds where residents can still voice their opinions, but we can maybe try to consolidate questions and keep things on the rails.
you know, we have had very poor turnout so far at all of these events. It would be great to have people do it, especially if it's going to be online. If half of the people who responded are summer residents and are not here now, they can still participate. And this is a good way to write back to all those people who did provide something and say, hey, thank you for filling out this response. We're still analyzing data, but we want you to know about this public meeting. It's going to happen here, then here's the link. If you have any questions, our facilitator will pose them, so let us know. That would be a great way to do it, I think, so.
Probably for all people, not just Spectrum, because there might be people who
Everybody,
are
anybody.
trying to get Spectrum but haven't gotten them yet or so on.
Exactly, yeah. I think anybody who gave us an email address, it's a good way to thank them for doing the survey, very helpful. And FYI, we're still working on it, analyzing it. Here's the next step. Join us if you like. Good idea.
The vast majority of people, everybody in Vetro gave them. And I would say it looks like probably 80% of other people did. So we probably have about 200 emails there.
Yeah, that's good. If others like that idea, if you want me to draft an email that we would send to them from this committee, I can do that and put all of our names at the bottom of it, copy us all on the email so you know what's going out. It would be like, I don't know if I can do that. Can I? Sometimes Google won't let me send out 200 emails, you know, so I'll have to figure that logistics out.
Derlin, do you know, is there a way we could do it sort of through similar to what we do with the email alerts that the town sends out? So they look like they just arrive from the town of Mount Desert
That
rather
would be
than
best.
an individual. I don't know if there's a way for someone in the office to do that or not.
Yeah, I don't know, why don't you, Kathy, call and ask, because I don't know enough about the technology and the mechanics of it to be able to answer that. So
Okay.
maybe possible. We'll certainly accommodate it if we can, yeah.
Who should I ask then, Derlin? Would I ask
Jen, I think would be a good one,
Jennifer?
yeah.
Okay, good.
So she'd be the one that would be more apt to be doing it, so.
Okay, all right, good. I will do that.
Yep.
And actually, I have since, I didn't want to confuse the issue. Well, every time I go into the town office for any reason, they have one more survey that they give me. So I've got a couple more surveys that aren't even in that data, but I'll try and add them into that file, so.
Yeah, and Kat, it's all those charts are
Buzz
set
and
up to feed from that. So as you add them to, maybe add them in both places to the Google one and maybe to combine, that would probably be ideal.
Okay.
And mark it as paper, but you and I can talk about that too.
Okay. All right, we'll take that offline.
Or if you want to just send them to me or something, I'd be happy to maintain the data set.
Okay.
Okay, next item. I know that Derlin, you've been in communication with what, Scott Atkins, I think it is?
Scott Adkins, yeah, and he has his assistant that's actually in charge of all of that. Kitty something, I forget what her last name, I don't have the email in front of me.
Yeah.
So what I want to do is invite them to come to our next regular meeting to explain what the scope of their survey actually is. And how it may dovetail in with us, maybe it would allow us perhaps to limit the scope of ours depending on what it comes in, or it may be just something that is that we're going to still need to do the full scale, fiber mapping study there with.
And you're talking about all of the Hancock
Yeah, they're
County.
talking about all of Hancock County because through their opera grant, they're going to use that to do that particular survey. Now, again, I'm not quite sure what the scope of the survey is, whether, because in Hancock County, they're apt to be dealing with everyone from high-speed broadband to nothing. So, whether they will be looking at a plan to try to, like we did in Pretty Marsh, to provide a basic level of broadband service in through that, whether that's what they're looking for, or whether they're going to say, Hancock County could really benefit from fiber to every residence and business. So that's what we can kind of find out what they would be looking at. And then we can tailor what we're doing along those lines, I think, depending on what the result of that is. Now, I don't know if Kendra, Joe, if you have inkling of what they're considering at the moment or not?
I don't, just partly because Hancock County's been one of our coastal counties that have been a little quiet on ARPA.
Yeah.
Hancock and well, I know where Washington stands on broadband, but they wouldn't be the only, I think Piscataquis is another one that's doing kind of countywide planning. I wouldn't say necessarily surveying, but they are looking to a consultant to do an entire feasibility study of their county. So that might be the path that Hancock is going down. I mean, if anything, this could feed into it, depending on the consultant. If the consultant was Brian Leopold, right, then this would feed into that.
And
If they're going,
I believe it is. I think that they have selected someone other than Brian to do their work.
interesting. Okay, so all consultants use Vetro in Maine, so it's pretty consistent data. It's just if that consultant would want to use the data that already exists from communities, because there are communities in Hancock County that are doing their own planning process and not looking to the county to, or weren't prepared, nor are they looking to the county to come out with information for them. For the towns that aren't doing anything, it's valuable, but for those that are already doing something, it's a couple steps behind. Is that the only broadband identified broadband project that they have for ARPA funds? Do
So
you know?
far, Kendra, that's the only one I'm aware of. I think that they are planning on using that survey as a basis to decide how to use the rest of the money that they have on ARPA that they want to put into broadband. And how that may get distributed out, whether it gets distributed out into the communities individually, or whether there's just a big project that they would do. I think they're starting from scratch, as you say. So,
Derlin, is it fair to share what Scott Adkins shared in his email?
sure, it's all public record.
He said that at this time, the county has obtained the services of John Doherty Mission Broadband as a consultant who will perform the survey actions necessary for mapping and infrastructure assessment. What this information does, aside from having the local knowledge, is allows and simplifies the access to current and future federal monies coming down the pipeline. And it's Kitty Barbie, who's there from Barbie Business Services,
Interesting name, yeah.
is the person who's their ARP consultant for that. So I don't know Mission Broadband Consulting, but
Wonder where they are from, where they work out of.
do you know much about them, Kendra Jo?
I do, but I couldn't tell you where they're actually based. I think my brain assumes Portland. But yeah, JD and Mission Broadband are prevalent in Maine, mostly inland Maine, not so much coastal Maine. So we don't overlap too much. I have my reservations about Mission Broadband in general. So I don't usually see them come up a lot on the coast.
We have not responded to Brian Lippold at all yet about his proposal to us. How do you think we might proceed on that?
He mentioned a different, a discount price if we combined all the towns on MDI, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Has that been floated in League of Towns or even with Bar Harbor yet?
We ought to make sure it's on the agenda for the meeting coming up. 1, 2, 3, 4. Gosh, it must be the 19th. No way. The 26th. That day, I think that's the League of Towns meeting, which is also the day of our thing. So maybe send me something on that I can throw into the agenda for that meeting.
Okay.
And also, as Matt would realize this, but I did move that $4,000 that was left over consulting services. I did move that over to this fiscal year. So I think we have about $14,000 now in our consulting line, so.
Is it,
And-
would it be worth exploring just going directly with him and not through the other towns in terms of our budget? Or do you think it makes more sense to first exhaust the option of the whole island?
I think it'd be interesting to see sort of hear from Mission Broadband directly, sort of what's the end product that we're going to get from them and compare it to what we think we get from Brian. And I will say, I just checked online and Mission Broadband's based out of Bangor for what it's worth.
Thanks. We're all virtual these days, so I
I know,
can't place
exactly.
anyone anymore.
They've
So-
got a physical address in Bangor. That might be it.
So
I
the
can't
three
imagine
options,
how we could get all the towns on board in a timely fashion.
that's what I was thinking. It might just really slow down the process.
Yeah.
You know,
But the three
hopefully
op-
if we can get some momentum going, maybe that's the best thing we can do for other towns is get momentum going to help them get their act in gear as well, maybe, I don't know.
Well, at least if, maybe it'd be worth knowing if Bar Harbor is chasing down a consultant and if it's also the same consultant or not. That might be useful knowledge as we, sounds like we'll wait to hear from Mission, or it's like we have Mission, which is a countywide, or we go directly with our consultant, or we try to combine towns as the three options. Is that a fair assessment?
And you might,
Yeah.
you know, we know that Southwest Harbor doesn't seem to be really interested in doing a lot of collegial projects, but Bar Harbor is, and I think Tremont probably may be, so it might not be
And
difficult.
Trenton.
Yeah, and Trenton, so it may not be all that difficult to put that coalition together, so.
Well, you'll have a pretty good idea of that 26th meeting, right, Carolyn?
Oh, yeah.
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 So we'll wait, you know, that will be one of, you know, Derlin can report back for our next meeting in November as far as what he learned, if anything, from the League of Towns.
And then is there a way to find out in the same time period what the nature of the Hancock County study will be and the results, to Matt's point?
I'm going to invite them to come to League of Towns too.
That would be sooner than our next meeting.
Yeah, so you know, based on the results of what they do at League of Towns, that may decide whether we want them to come to our next meeting. So they'll give us some indication. So I'm going to, in fact, I don't know if I invited them to ours and there are answers. I'm also, while we're talking, I'm going to send out an email to them to see if they're interested in coming to League of Towns on the 26th. So
That'd be
I'll do
great.
that right now. So feel
Okay.
free to talk.
Okay,
I'll do that.
Kathy, are we ready to move on?
I guess so.
Discussion next steps? Well, I know one thing we're gonna do is you're going to try to make, break away those survey results a little bit, right? Between the Google, what came in on paper and what came in through Google, was that right?
Yes, I think that on that, we'll try and see about getting everything onto the Vetro platform so we can look at the mapping, because that
Yep.
is a good visual to share. We will clean up surveys, so we will distinguish between paper, Google, Vetro formats. We'll determine villages for each of the respondents so that we have a clearer sense of that as well.
Yeah, if you guys think in terms of village, if that's helpful, if you think the residents would resonate with village level data, then that makes sense.
Mhm.
I'm still kind of new to the town, so. My village is also very, very, very small.
Right.
Village of Sound.
Yeah,
Well,
I'm
maybe
glad
we'll-
you're using the term Sound Village. We've been trying to bring that back and it looks like we're getting successful. We now call it the 8 villages of Mount Desert rather than the 6.
You know, when we get Spectrum, I think all of us will formulate questions for Spectrum but we should do that quickly and maybe send those to Kendra Jo, or we can collect them among ourselves and send her just one set of questions from us. But one of the questions I would have, Kendra Jo, is what are their plans for introducing fiber to this area? You know, that's sort of a basic. Ultimately, we all know that that's what we someday want to go to. If anybody's putting in anything now, why would you put in cable instead of fiber? So, so what are their very concrete plans for that? How much can they tell us? And we will work with the town to email respondents and anybody else who's interested in, you know, has signed up for broadband info from the town regarding that spectrum date. So we can get everybody on board for that.
I can
Kathy, I'd be
draft-
more than happy sometime in this next week if you want to get together and we can go over the survey and see if we can come up with some, you know, see if there's some common threads.
Okay,
Spectrum.
happy to do that. Yes.
Okay.
And I'm happy to draft a little bit of a run of show. It won't be that complex, and some questions that other communities have asked, and share that with you all on just a Word doc. And if you have feedback and comments to it.
That would be great. Thank you.
And I think actually there could be some next steps that come out of that spectrum meeting.
Yes.
Maybe not, but maybe so. So.
Okay, so we've got League of Towns meeting coming up. We're going to see about engaging the other towns, including the county commissioners and what they're planning on doing. We're going to see about adding the other information on the back end to the Vetro. We're going to clean up the survey with village information, paper, Google, etc. Spectrum, we're going to formulate some questions. Scott and I will get together, review that stuff. Kendra Jo will provide a run of show. And we're going to work with the town staff to coordinate an email from the broadband committee from the town to all the people who responded and anybody else who's on their natural list about this to help market that event.
Yeah.
And Kathy, I won't really be around until probably early November, but if you want to, I can help with getting things into Vetro maybe, unless you have somebody who's been helping you with the Vetro backend, as well as any more of the spreadsheet cleanup.
How long will you be around before you're not around?
I'll be around. I'm leaving next week.
Okay, you're available tomorrow.
Yes, yeah, you can try to catch me tomorrow.
Okay. Somebody at Vetro said, yes, they were going to see about if we gave them the information, sort of a, is it CSV, CBS format that
Yeah.
they would see about adding that in their way. And I haven't heard back from them yet.
I
So,
can help with that.
okay. But I can give you the two, I'll drop off with you the two other hard copies that I have that we can add into the system.
Yep, yeah, I'll be in the office until 3 tomorrow.
Okay.
All right. I guess we're ready for any other business. I haven't, not hearing any, then let's look at our next scheduled meeting. We all know the change in the spectrum meeting, but in terms of our next committee meeting, I guess it looks like that falls on Veterans Day. Do we want to switch the day?
That's right, it does. I would probably be working that day anyway, so it's
It
okay.
doesn't matter to me. Yeah.
That's fine.
Okay, we'll keep it as is then.
11/11.
Yep.
Okay. Derlin, you might not be working then. Is the office closed on Veterans Day?
Yeah, we are closed that day, so I may or may not come in from, depending on what I'm doing that day, so.
Well,
Should be fine.
It'd be very exciting I'm doing, I probably won't, so.
well, if Derlin's going to report back to us, Do we want to change that meeting day then?
Or I could just be a good man and commit to putting in that hour. So why don't we do that?
You sure? We don't want to, I
That'd be
mean, if it's-
easier than changing everything around. Because
okay,
good news is we're getting an upgraded Zoom license, so we won't get a problem of two, places meeting at the same time and knocking one off. So we can, otherwise, this will make it much easier because there may be something else, although I doubt there'd be another town function on the 11th, seeing it's a holiday, but we'll make it work. I'll make it work. I can
okay.
say that, so,
Thank you very much.
no problem.
Well, I think we're ready to adjourn. Thank you. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded, all in favor?
Yes, seconded. Aye.
All right. All right, well, thank you, everybody. And I'll be in touch with you, Kathy, about when we want to get together.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
All right,
Thanks.
thank you. See you now. Bye-bye.